This happened last year, at the peak of my partying stage. I was at a friend's house drinking, and at around 2 a.m., I was pretty drunk and decided to call an Uber to take me home. The car pulled up, and I have this habit of sitting in the front with the driver. He was a young man, around mid to late 20s, and I don't remember too much about what we were talking about, but I do recall his compliments going from "you're really pretty" to "you're really hot." And he kept saying I reminded him of his mother. I found it really strange, especially considering I was 19. But I tried to laugh it off because I didn't want to appear to be rude. I asked him to swing by through a drive-thru at a burger stop because I was hungry. We got the food and he was supposed to take me home, but I noticed he was driving literally the wrong direction, opposite to where my house was. I looked at his map and I kept telling him to turn around, so I asked him where we were going. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "Oh, you don't want to come over to my house?" I remember I completely sobered up and said, "No, please take me home." I didn't recall if we continued talking after that, but luckily he took me home and I never heard anything from him again. I also reported him the next day. What really upsets me is that he clearly knew he was taking advantage over me. I can't imagine what would have happened if I never spoken up. It's safe to say that I won't be Ubering alone at night anymore. So last night, around midnight, me and my partner got an Uber from a friend's house back to my place. For reference, we live about a mile and a half away from the friend, but in a dark, kind of sketchy part of town, so we didn't want to walk. We ordered the Uber and smoked a joint while waiting for him to show up. We got in and do the typical Uber greetings. It's a short drive, about 10 minutes, and it was about to be the longest ride of my life. He starts the conversation by asking if we had just escaped from a place called Sage View. At the time, I didn't know this, but after looking it up, it turns out to be a psych ward near where we got picked up. I told him no, just going home after a fun night. He laughs and says that he spent some time at the Sage View himself. I ask him why he spent time there. He replies by saying, "Well, it's because I'm crazy." This unnerves me a little, but I figure we'll be home soon enough, and I joke back that I'm a little crazy myself, and how everyone is in their own way. There's a very long pause before he says, "I got arrested at my therapy's appointment. Said some things to my therapist that he didn't like." This sets off so many alarm bells inside my brain. I almost jumped out of the car with my partner. I'm trying to slightly get her attention, but like always, when she's with me, she kinda shut off her situational awareness and doesn't notice anything is wrong. I decided to keep him talking because silence makes me very uneasy. I asked him what he said to his therapist that he didn't like. He laughs for way too long for a question like that and says that it doesn't matter. Then there's another very long pause. Then out of nowhere, he says with a very threatening inflection, he was asking me too many questions. At that point, I took the hint and stopped pushing the subject and started directing him myself instead of trusting him to follow the map. We had maybe about 2 minutes left in the drive and I noticed him staring daggers at me in the mirror, not even watching the road. I tell him to just pull over and let us out because I feel no amount of walking is worse than being in a car with that man. Me and my partner got out and started speed walking away while he sits there in the middle of the road watching us. Didn't hurt the car start until we were down on the next street. I had 911 already dialed. If I saw his car again that night, I wouldn't have hesitated. I don't know what was up with this guy, but I hope I never see him again. And to top it all off, my partner was completely oblivious the entire time until I recounted the story with her once we got home. A few years back, when I was 17 years old, I went to a party. Everything was alright until the host started getting really intense and creepy. By that point, it was already 3 a.m., and I was already pretty drunk. I decided to call an Uber in order to avoid any advances from the instant guy. The Uber shows up, and I try to sober up when I get in. The driver starts making small talk with me, and in the state I was, I failed to see the red flags. He starts to ask me about the party I was at, and I told him about the creep, and he then told me it was because I was short and cute. He then answered my age, and sensing a weird vibe from him, I told him I was a minor, thinking that would deter any further advances, but it turns out it was a horrible idea. He was driving pretty recklessly on the highway, and I snapped out of my drunken state. He then asked me to get drinks with him that same night and told me he really liked me. I quickly told him that I'll get grounded if I stayed any longer and that my mother was awake and waiting for me at home. When we got to my home address, I noticed the doors were still locked, and he kept insisting on us going to get a drink, even though by now it's almost 4 a.m. I tried to act as nice as possible when I told him I couldn't that night. He then asked for my phone number and told me we can go out the next day. So not being the first time that some creep had asked for my phone number, I gave him my number but changed the last digit so he couldn't actually contact me. But then he actually dialed the phone as I was getting out of the car. Of course, my phone didn't ring, and he started getting agitated and said I gave him the wrong number. I played drunk and stupid and recited my number again, but actually said it correctly in order for him to think he heard the last number wrong. He chuckled and said it was his bad and told me we'll see each other the next day. I made my way to my house and immediately woke my mom up because I was terrified. She managed to calm me down and told me to go to bed and started putting my pajamas on when I heard my phone ring. The Uber driver was trying to video call me, and I lost my shit when I saw that on my screen. I immediately denied the call, and then noticed he sent me about 15 messages asking what time he could come and pick me up, and why wasn't I replying. Of course, I blocked him right away and thought that would be the end of it. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number and checked the picture and saw it was the driver. He asked me why I blocked him and started spamming me. I immediately blocked him. Over the course of the next month, I've got random messages from random phone numbers, and it quickly became obvious that it was the driver. I would always block him, but eventually I reported him on the Uber app and changed my number. The only problem is, he knows where I live.